Hello and welcome to episode number 5 of First Down Focus. I am your host, Darrien Mogel. Today is just me. I got no special guest today, but we got a lot to talk about. Free agency just started this week, and there was a lot of stuff that happened since it's opened, including the Philadelphia Eagles losing a lot of players. And I'm going to go over a couple winners and losers from the free agency period. Then I'm going to go over my top 10 wide receiver duo rankings. There's a few new duos that hit the NFL this free agency in this offseason. So I will be ranking those 1 through 10. Then we're going to end with a nice best bets segment as always. So let's get into it right away. The Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia Eagles, they lost a lot of players in this free agency, but that was to be expected. As Adam Schefter said, there is a price to pay when you win the Super Bowl, and that is everybody wants your players. So it's really hard to keep the same group together year in and year out. So what the Chiefs did was that much more impressive, going Super Bowl 3 years in a row. So the Philadelphia Eagles, they lost 7 players. A lot of key players on their defense. They lost a few other ones on the offensive side, but none were actually starters on the offensive side. Not yet. I mean, Mekhi Becton still has yet to sign. This is Friday at around 2 o'clock. So from now until tomorrow, maybe that changes. But I don't hate what they did, though, in the offseason, because obviously they couldn't afford to keep everybody on their roster. It just wasn't going to happen. They didn't have the cap space, and I don't think any team in the NFL, there's no team that would have been able to would have been able to keep all these players. It just wouldn't have happened. So let's talk about the main trade that happened with the Philadelphia Eagles. We have C.J. Gardner-Johnson going to Houston. C.J. went to Houston, and I love C.J. It hurt seeing him leave. Like, I was so surprised when I first saw this trade pop up on my phone, but it makes sense. I understand what Howie's doing. He's trying to free up money down the line because we have so many young guys that we have to pay. We have Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter being the two that are probably going to get paid this upcoming season as far as extensions go. Then you have other rookies that will be like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean that in 2 years you're going to have to pay them too. So we had to free up some money down the line in order to have these players on our team and in order to extend the young guys on the team. So CJ was mainly a money move, and I don't think this would have happened if they don't have trust in Sidney Brown. Sidney Brown is, I like the way he plays. He's a great special teamer, and he flies the football on the defense side of the ball. He's a heavy hitter. He's a hard hitter. So I want to see what he does in a starting role. I think that he can take over for CJ Gardner-Johnson. Obviously, CJ was a great player. It's going to be hard to do what he did. But I think if anyone could do it, it would be Sidney Brown. And we're getting Kenyon Green from Houston. I don't know how to feel about him quite yet, but I don't think this trade is made without Jeff Stoutland sitting next to Howie Roseman, because Howie sure as hell didn't just call up Houston and specifically ask for Kenyon Green. I'm sure that he was probably asking around some of the better teams if how much they value CJ Gardner-Johnson, and maybe his name was one of a few names that were thrown in there. And I'm sure Jeff Stoutland took a look at Kenyon Green before any deal was made, just to see if he is able to fix him in any way. And I think that he sees some potential in him, hence why Kenyon Green is now a Philadelphia Eagle. So I don't hate the trade. I am very much so upset to see C.J. Gardner-Johnson leave, just because he was a great leader and he brought a lot of intensity and he just had Philly written all over him. So sad to see him leave. I understand the move, and I'm excited to see if Kenyon Green can step in there. And I think that move also indicates that Mekhi Becton is a lot less likely to sign back. I don't know where he's going to go yet, but I would love to have him back. Worst comes to worst, Kenyon Green is just a fill-in type of guy that can fill in for anyone that gets injured. But he might be our starting guard, so I don't know. And then we added guys like A.J. Dillon, I think is a huge addition to the backfield, takes a little bit of pressure off of Saquon Barkley in the short yardage situations. Obviously, he's going to help a ton on the tush push, because now you got Hurts taking the snap and being pushed by Saquon and A.J. Dillon. Like, those two guys are both massive running backs, and it's going to be very hard to stop that tush. It already was very hard, but now you're adding A.J. Dillon in the mix, pushing alongside Saquon with Hurts with the ball in his hands and one of the biggest offensive lines in NFL history. So I really like the addition of A.J. Dillon. I think he's going to get a decent amount of carries. He's going to be a good guy to fill in for when Saquon needs his breaks. And then we added Uche, I think that's how you say his last name, the edge rusher. He played with New England, and he played with Kansas City. He's only 26 years old, and I did see he had like one really good season. Other than that, he played not so great. But I mean, he's a depth piece. He's a piece that we're going to need to add to the defense from losing all these guys. And then Harrison Bryant. I don't know how to feel about Harrison Bryant because adding Harrison Bryant, and I just saw something probably about 30 minutes ago that they're now in trade talks. Like they're looking to trade. I don't know if it's a package of Bryce Huff and Dallas Goedert, or if it's like they're just looking to dish out both of those guys in like different deals. That I'm not sure of. I didn't see too much into it, but I did see that there was reports that Bryce Huff and Dallas Goedert are both they're searching for trades right now. Philly's trying to trade those two guys. So I love Dallas Goedert too. It's gonna hurt to see him go. Bryce Huff, I could care less. I want him to get traded because he has a massive contract and he did jack squat for us last year. So we proved that we really don't need him. Sure, he might be a great depth piece now that we lost Sweat and probably Brandon Graham on the outside. But yeah, I don't know what they're going to get for Huff and Goddard. I don't know if they're going for draft compensation or trying to get more depth pieces. But then we also added a Dory Jackson. And Dory Jackson, I think, could be a pretty good depth piece for us. He's not going to be a starter. That's just not going to happen because he was once a first round draft pick, but he didn't really do much in the NFL. So I don't mind him as a special teamer type of guy or just depth at the cornerback position. So overall, I don't hate the Eagles' free agency. Obviously, they lost a ton of guys, so I wouldn't say they got better at the free agency because obviously it's pretty obvious that they got worse as a team, but they're still at the top of the league. I don't want to get that mixed up. They got worse as a team because they lost all these players, but they were so good that losing these players because obviously they can't pay them, they lost these players, but they're still a top five team in the NFL. Like that, I think there's no doubt in people's mind that they're still a top five NFL football team, even though they just lost a bunch of their a few of their starters on defense, and then a lot of role players that they lost as well. But I'm not panicking. I'm trusting the process of Howie Roseman. He has been doing it for a long time for Philly, and he won his 2 Super Bowls, and he's had some crazy good moves over the last few years. So I'm trusting this process, and I believe that Howie's going to be able to figure it out for us, and we're going to be just fine this year. So let's go on to a few winners and losers of this free agency. These are just teams that I think did really well. I wouldn't say they like absolutely killed it, but they got better and they filled the spots that they needed to fill. And then there's some teams that I just don't know what they're doing. I'm confused at what direction they're trying to head in. So a few winners. I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're not necessarily, they didn't like rock free agency, but they made a few trades and they picked up some key guys. When I look at the Steelers, obviously they still need a quarterback. Like that's the one thing that's being circled on a lot of people's boards when you don't know how Pittsburgh's going to be. But they got DK Metcalf in a trade, which I think that is huge for DK. DK and this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. I don't think Russ is going to be their quarterback this year. I mean, I think if he was going to be their quarterback, he would have already signed a deal to come back. But adding DK to that receiving core, George Pickens, he was a very he was good. He's a good wide receiver one, but he's not a great wide receiver one, and he needed a little bit of help, and he didn't really have much other help last year on the outside. But now he's going to have a lot of pressure off him with DK on the other side, because now defense has got to worry about covering George Pickens and DK Metcalf, not just George Pickens anymore. So, and then you add that with they already have Pat Freiermuth, who I think is a top 10 tight end in the NFL right now, because I don't think there's many good ones at all right now. So I see Pat Freiermuth as a top 10 tight end. So I think this offense can put something together, especially adding Kenny Gainwell as well. Another Eagles guy that I was sad to see leave. But, I mean, I understand. So Kenny Gainwell and Jalen Warren now in that backfield. And then that really brings up a question. Where are they going to go with this? I think they have the 21st pick in the draft. I don't know where they're going to go. I feel like it has to be a quarterback. But then at that 21st spot, I don't know if Jackson Dart's going to be there anymore. There's a lot of teams early in this draft that need a quarterback, and I don't know if Jackson Dart's going to last that long. I have him going within like the top like 15 picks of the draft. Um, so I don't know if they're going to try to trade up to get their guy. I don't know if they just take a running back there and then wait till round 2 or 3 to take a quarterback. I'm not entirely sure what direction they're going to go in. But other than their quarterback situation, I think they filled a lot of the spots they had to fill. They added Malik Harrison on defense and Darius Slay on defense. And then you have guys like Gainwell on offense that you added DK on offense. So, and then they got rid of, they lost Fields. So Fields, I don't think was in a good position there anyway. He had a good like first 3 weeks of the season when he was a starter. But then after that, you can tell that he just wasn't their guy, and they had Russ, and they're like, all right, Russ is our guy when he's healthy. He's going to be in there. So they just didn't have faith in him. I don't think that was a good situation for Justin Fields. And then same thing with Najee Harris. Najee Harris has been disappointing for most of his NFL career in Pittsburgh. I know he was very highly like respected early on in his career, and he had a high expectations coming to Pittsburgh out of Alabama, and he just didn't really get over the top. He had some okay seasons, he had some down seasons, but I think he's going to in a way better position now in LA than he was with Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is one of my winners, and my other winner I have the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, I think they hammered this free agency. They built up in the trenches, and I think they saw what Philly did. I mean, I think they dodged a bullet with not re-signing Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold had one good season. He's been in the NFL for like 5 or 6 years. He finally had one good season, then got paid over $100 million. So I think they dodged a bullet with letting him walk and just rocking with your rookie quarterback, who's getting a lot less of a cap hit than what Sam Darnold would have been. So you re-sign Harrison Smith and Byron Murphy. I think two guys that are going to keep your secondary in shape. And then you add guys in the defensive line like Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen are two massive human beings in the D line. At one point a few years ago, they were looked at as like two of the best defensive tackles in the entire league. So adding those two guys in the sure they're a little bit older, but that's gonna. I think the Vikings are looking at it within these next like 2 seasons, 2 3 years. They're looking at this as like a win now situation. So adding those two guys and then adding depth at the cornerback spot with Isaiah Rodgers on defense. Then you go on the offense side of the ball. They add Ryan Kelly and Will Fries on the offensive side on the line. So they really built up. They put money in the trenches because they saw how good Philly was on the offensive line and the defensive line, and that won them a lot of games and won them a Super Bowl. So I think Minnesota looks at that, and they already have the weapons. I mean, they have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, who just made Sam Darnold look like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he's been one of the worst over the last few years. So I think JJ McCarthy will be just fine in that offense. I think he's going to be their quarterback of the future. And the Vikings really nailed this free agency with bulking up that D line, adding pieces on the offensive line, and then solidifying your secondary. So I really like what the Vikings did. I can see them making a little bit of a run, and possibly the playoffs this year, and maybe even make a run to the Super Bowl. I don't know. Let's go to a few losers. I wouldn't say one team. I think I'm just confused where they're going. And then the 49ers I have as one of the losers. And I think that's mainly just because of losing a lot of players. They didn't really sign any big name type of guys. They signed a few guys back to other deals. But I think they're heading towards a rebuild mode, but they still have like CMC and they have older guys like CMC and George Kittle and all that on the offensive side. So I think their offense can still be very like competitive and very good, but their defense has taken a hit. They lost all these guys. They released a bunch of these guys. And I just don't know if they're just looking at rebuilding, if they think that these guys were not good enough for their team to just release them. I'm not really sure because I traded away Debo, obviously. That was one of the first big offseason trades that happened. And then they lost guys on the defensive side like Dre Greenlaw, Leonard Floyd, Hufanga, Ward. Then offense, they lost Jalen Moore, Aaron Banks, Kyle Juszczyk. So they like kind of cleared house almost of all the older type of guys. And then guys like Hufanga's not old. Like that they didn't re-sign these guys back. And I think the 49ers have been competitive these last like 5 seasons because they've had such a good defense. Their offense has been good enough. Their defense is really what's been carrying these last like 5 seasons. So I don't see them making any sort of run. I know the 49ers were a lot of people's sleeper team coming into this season just because they had so many injuries last year. But when I look at the 49ers team now, their defense, sure, they still have Nick Bosa. Like he's still one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL. But you lost a lot of your players on that defense side of the ball. And you got Jimmy G and Brock Purdy to the Super Bowl because your defense was so good, not because your offense was the best in the NFL, but because your defense was able to hold teams to low scores and you were able to score enough on offense to beat those teams. I'm sure you have blowouts in some of those seasons. I understand that, but when I just look at the 49ers, they have been dominant the last 5 years because of they've had a really good defense and kept them in a lot of ball games and kept the score pretty low, and their offense did enough. So getting rid of all your players, I'm kind of confused. I think that they're going into like a little bit of a rebuild, but I think they should, if they're doing that, then they should trade CMC, get some draft picks for him, or just get rid of his cap. And same thing with maybe George Kittle, but George Kittle might retire 49ers, so that one I slightly understand. I just don't know. And then another team, the Las Vegas Raiders. I expect them to do a lot more. They added quite a few guys, but it was all guys to really like 1 or 2 year deals that are just going to fill in for the time being. I thought that they were going to at least try to sign some big name type of guys after they gave that extension to Max Crosby, because they gave that extension to Max Crosby. I was like, oh, okay. They're re-signing him for big bucks. They're going to go out and make some moves. They're going to draft the quarterback really high. They might add some receiver help or something, and they might be a little bit competitive. But no, instead they trade a draft pick for a 34-year-old quarterback, Geno Smith, who has one more year in his contract. And then you lose Spillane, you lose Diablo, you lose Hobbs, you lose Moring, and then you add a bunch of one-year type of guys like Stokes and Johnson, Roberts, Jeremy Chin. You sign back Adam Butler, Alex Cap. So I mean, you get a bunch of guys that are going to be on 1 year, 2 year type of deals that are just going to be there for this year. Like I don't know if I just don't know what the plan is for the Raiders. And that's a little bit of my problem with the 49ers, but the Raiders more so. They give a ton of money to Max Crosby, which is it's due. Like he's a very good defensive player, but he said so himself that he wants to go somewhere he can win. Same thing as Myles Garrett. But as soon as you throw the dollar signs at both those guys, they're like, you know what? It's not too bad of a place to play here. So that he signed back, and I don't know which direction the Raiders are going to go in. They might even end up with another top 3 pick next year. I think they have 6 this year. But the way that they're going, I don't know who they're going to be drafting. And Geno Smith has 1 year on his deal. So I just don't know what direction they're going in. And they didn't really do much. They didn't do enough for me, being how bad they were. I thought they would add a lot more pieces this free agency. All right, that wraps up the free agency. Obviously, there was a lot more moves that happened, but I just want to stick to 2 winners, 2 losers, and then recap what the Eagles did. So let's move on to the top 10 wide receiver duo rankings. There's a few new duos that entered this list this season because of free agency and trades and all that good stuff. So I'm going to get right into my top 10 ranking. And number 1, I think, is pretty – a lot of people have them at this number 1 spot, and they have had him there for like the last 2 years. And that is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I couldn't move them down at all because Jamar Chase coming off a triple crown winning season. So Jamar Chase, he proved last year that he's one of the best, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. Then T. Higgins is one of the top number 2 wide receivers in the NFL. So I can't drop them out of the number 1 spot. And then number 2, I have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. This one's a little tricky for me because I'm an Eagles fan, so I might be a little bit biased. But they're coming off. They've been known as one of the best duos in the NFL because obviously Smith was the wide receiver 1 before A.J. Brown got there. So they're both wide receiver 1 material. They're both very good players, and they're coming off a Super Bowl win. So no other duo on this list besides one have won a Super Bowl together. Sure, there's some guys that won some individually, but as a duo, none have won it together yet. So that's why I put Brown and Smith at number 2, because they won a Super Bowl. They're a proven wide receiver duo, and they're both at or over 1,000 receiving yards just about every single season they've been together so far. Then number 3, a new duo. I have Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua. I know I've seen people put him at 1. I've seen a few at 2. I've seen him as low as 5. Devontae Adams is getting older, but he's been very consistent. He's 32 years old now, and dude's been doing it for a long time, but he's been consistent. Whenever he's healthy, he is going to get his numbers more times than not. And I think with Matthew Stafford at quarterback, that duo is going to be very deadly, and it's going to be very hard to cover both those guys. Because before, obviously, Puka, he was the wide receiver 2 his rookie year, but then he grew into the wide receiver 1. Cooper Kupp was injured each of the last 2 seasons, like pretty often. And Puka really took on that wide receiver 1 role, and he just ran with it. Puka has been having a great 2 seasons so far in the NFL when he's healthy. And I think Adams and Puka together, with Stafford as your quarterback, Stafford's known to make his receivers look and be really good, like Cooper Kupp, like Puka Nacua, and then Calvin Johnson when he had him. And he's gotten some guys contracts that they don't even deserve, honestly. So I had to put them at the number 3 spot. Then moving to number 4, I have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And that's mainly because Justin Jefferson is right there with Jamar Chase as the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. Them two are pretty much 1A and 1B at the moment. So Justin Jefferson, I couldn't leave him outside the top 5 for sure. But I put Addison, I think he's one of the top wide receiver 2s in the NFL. I just don't know if he has wide receiver 1 capability, because I think when Justin Jefferson went down, so did Jordan Addison's production, just because everyone can focus on him then. So I have them at the number 4 spot. And then going to number 5. Number 5, some people had them at number 1, like beginning of last year. And that's Hill and Waddle. Hill and Waddle are both, they're hard to cover just because they're so fast and they're good route runners, right? Tyreek Hill is probably one of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL, next to maybe Worthy and a couple other guys. But Tyreek Hill is a nightmare to cover, and so is Jalen Waddle. But they've both been, it's been trouble trying to keep them both healthy at the same time and have Tua healthy with them. Because as soon as Tua goes down, their numbers are terrible. Like Tyreek Hill's numbers are like 2 receptions, 15 yards, 3 receptions, 20 yards. Like his stats go way down when Tua's not there. And that's not really his fault. That's just because I think their backup is so bad, that they're just not competitive anymore. So Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are sitting at the number 5 spot for me. Then number 6, the only other duo that has won a Super Bowl together, and that is Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. As long as both of these guys are healthy, which obviously Chris Godwin had an injury last season, but Mike Evans is Mr. Consistency. Like, this dude does it. He's, 11 straight seasons now. Every year he's been in the NFL, he's had 1,000 receiving yards. So Mike Evans has been so consistent, and Chris Godwin has been his counterpart for each of the last 5 or 6 seasons now. So them two, they're consistent. They're both good. I have at number 6 spot. Number 7, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams is a tricky one, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is so good I could not leave both of them off this list because of how good Amon-Ra St. Brown is. Jameson Williams is a little bit tricky because he doesn't get a ton of receptions, but he can burn you for 60, 70 yards down the sideline. So it's tough to rank them it's tough to rank these guys in a certain order with Jameson Williams being there, because I don't see Jameson Williams as one of the top receivers in the NFL, but I would put him fairly in right around that number 5 spot for top 5 wide receiver 2s in the NFL. He just has to prove a little bit more, because he hasn't really had too many games where Amon-Ra St. Brown's been out and he had to be the wide receiver 1. So I want to see how he is kind of in that wide receiver 1 type of role. If Amon-Ra St. Brown has to miss any sort of play time, I want to see how he is as a wide receiver 1. But, I mean, they've had a ton of production, and since Jared Goff's been there with them, Jameson Williams has been just fine. And then number 8, another new duo. We have DK Metcalf and George Pickens. This duo could be at the top of this list at the end of this season. They are both very good receivers, and if they can stay healthy and stay out of trouble, mainly because both these guys are known to talk some shit. If these guys can stay out of trouble, stay away from each other when they're both pissed off, they got to take a break from each other, because otherwise they're going to let their temper get the best of them. But I think DK Metcalf and George Pickens are going to be a great duo together. It just depends who their quarterback is too. Their quarterback situation is not ideal, but if they can get someone in there that can sling it, I think this will be a great duo. Then number 9, I got Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin, our third new duo of the rankings. Terry McLaurin's been doing it with all different quarterbacks, and he finally has his quarterback in Jaden Daniels, and he had a great season this year. So I really think that, again, adding Deebo Samuel, it takes some pressure off of Terry McLaurin, because he's had to do it all each of the last 4 or 5 seasons that he's been in the NFL without a great starting quarterback. Now with Jaden Daniels, defense has got to watch out for Daniels. Defense has got to watch out for Terry, and defense has got to watch out for Deebo Samuel now too. So them at number 9, another duo that could be at closer to the top of this list by the end of the season. We don't really know yet. This is just right now based on production I've already seen from guys at the top and production that I think that these duos can end up having together in the 2025 season. The number 10 was tricky. There was a bunch of different duos that, I could slide them on there. But at the end of the day, these two guys didn't really have too much time together. They were on the same team, but one of them got injured, and that is Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice. Xavier Worthy, he had a great Super Bowl game. Sure, they were down by a ton when he got all of his yards, but people forget he had eight catches, 159 yards and 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Sure, that was, a lot of that was in garbage time. I know that. But he's taken that wide receiver 1 role since Rashee Rice got hurt back in week 4 or 5. He's been a fairly good wide receiver 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs. He hasn't been outstanding, but then look at Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice had a great rookie year, and he was on track. His first 4 games, he was going he was being consistent, and he had his catches. He got a few touchdowns. He was a really good receiver in the beginning of this season. And Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, now they both have multiple years under their belt. Well, Xavier Worthy has a full year, and Rashee Rice now has a season and a half. But I want to see what they do together, Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy as a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback. I think they're just a forgotten duo because they haven't played a ton together. Rashee Rice didn't have Worthy his rookie year, and then they only played together 4 games, and Xavier Worthy was still trying to work into what role he was going to be in. So I'm intrigued to see how they are, but I have them at my number 10 spot as the last spot on the wide receiver rankings. So that's my list. Sure, that can change once the season starts, but right now, this is who I believe 1 through 10 are the top 10 wide receiver duo rankings. Now let's get into the best bets. Always my favorite segment. But the best segment, there's not a ton to talk about yet because obviously we're still in the off season. Some stuff we can't even bet on. So I have one that we can't even bet on yet, at least not on FanDuel. There might be some other apps or sites that you might be able to find this on. But right now, I'm going to go with my comeback player of the year first, and that's J.J. McCarthy. Like I said, I talked about the Vikings earlier, and they did a really great job in free agency of getting key players on both the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball. And they have a ton of weapons on the outside with Jettas and Addison. So J.J. McCarthy has it all set up in front of him. Obviously, he's coming off an ACL tear, so that puts him in that conversation automatically of a comeback player of the year award. And he's a quarterback. Every single voter loves quarterbacks, whether it's an MVP award, comeback player of the year. They love a good quarterback story because if he can put together a pretty good season with those weapons, he's going to be in that conversation, no doubt. So I really like him. I don't know what his odds are. He might be the favorite. He might be lower on the list. I don't know yet because I didn't see any odds for that yet. But I already know I want to bet on him for the comeback player of the year. And then a sneaky MVP. I've done my favorites before and my long shots before. But ever since they added Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford is someone I want to look out for. He's sitting at plus 4,000. Stafford has been in a lot of MVP conversations throughout his career. And with that type of wide receiver duo on the outside, I think Stafford can really take advantage of that. And I think each guy is going to have 10-plus receiving touchdowns between Adams and Puka Nacua. But keep in mind, he also has a pretty good offensive line. He has Higbee at tight end yet. He has Kyron Williams in the backfield, so he has weapons around him still. And you got rid of Cooper Kupp, who, yeah, sure, that might hurt a little bit. But you have such a great – you're adding Devontae Adams, one of the best receivers of all time to play in the NFL. So just Stafford sitting at plus 4,000 is just too – it's too juicy not to put something on it. Maybe even if you throw $5-10 on it, $10 wins you $400 still. So that's a good return on investment if you ask me. So that's it. That's all I have for today. We talked about free agency, best bet segment, top 10 wide receiver rankings duo. So I do appreciate, as always, for everyone that didn't tune in today. And remember, we are doing a jersey giveaway at the end of March. We will be doing that at the end of every month. So if you have not already, please hit that subscribe button because that's the only way you could win the free jersey giveaway. And as always, leave a like on the video. Please comment down below any thoughts you might have had. And I'll see you next time. Peace out.